here to the Welcome back here to the Push to Pass podcast. I am Derek Vance, and I have the absolute pleasure now to be joined here for the next few minutes or so. Editor over at The Race, and then a podcast that he doesn't know this, but I frequently listen to over on Spotify, The Race, the IndyCar podcast as well. Host of that. Jack Benyon is going to stop by here for a few minutes to join us. Jack, again, first and foremost, like I said, a huge thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule, I'm sure, covering this season. But for everyone that doesn't know you, and it's a shame that they don't and they don't follow you on social media yet, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, the pleasure's all mine to start with. Thank you so much for having me on. It's always great to speak to like-minded people who love IndyCar. I'm a big fan of the championship, and yeah, it's really enjoyable to cover from a race-to-race basis. So really enjoying my time here in IndyCar. A little bit about myself. I'm obviously, as you can probably tell from my accent, from England and the UK. Got the chance to work with the race on covering IndyCar since the race started, just at the beginning of the pandemic there. So since basically February or March 2020. So yeah, it's been great. I've loved every minute of it. I'm still learning every day, every minute, meeting new people and getting to hear some more of the stories behind the scenes. But yeah, fundamentally, just really enjoying my time covering the series here.
Yeah, I've seen you a few times, believe it or not. This is my second year covering this. So I've been a fan in the shadows a little bit, but been a fan of you and the absolute amazing work that you put in over at the race. But before we get into this silly season, and what a silly season that we've had, and an interesting turn in that silly season, and we'll get to that here momentarily. But what piqued your interest, Jack, to not only get into journalism, but the racing aspect of journalism?
Well, my family have been involved in motorsport for a long time. My grandfather was the foreman at a Ford garage in Chester, near to where I live in the UK, and that just happened to be where the Ford rally team used to service their cars. You know, at the Wales Rally GB or Rally RAC, or it's had many names over the years, but the British round of the World Rally Championship. So my family always been close to rally cars, and then I guess the American connection came when I was really young. Obviously, you know, young kids like to stay up past their bedtime, and for me, the excuse to do that was always to watch NASCAR. And with it being in the UK, obviously the time zone difference, you know, we'd have to stay up quite late in the UK to watch some of the night races. But my memories go back to, you know, races like Atlanta with Jeff Gordon kind of under the lights. You know, I kind of envisioned the rainbow paint scheme kind of flickering under the lights at places like Atlanta in the nighttime, and that's a really sort of you know, a memory that I can almost feel going back to. You know, like you're transported back into your past, into your childhood. So yeah, NASCAR opened the door to American racing for me, and then yeah, obviously the kind of the beautiful paint scheme of the Ganassi cars back then really caught my eye as well. And with people like Alex Zanardi and Juan Pablo Montoya competing, it was never too difficult to get excited about the championship at that time. And since then, really enjoyed going back and learning a lot more about that era of the championship that I kind of lived through, but wasn't really kind of there for as such a young fan. So yeah, that'd be the kind of the whistle stop tour. And then journalism wise, I always wanted to compete in motorsport. That was always, you know, what I wanted to do. But like many people, kind of found out that I didn't have the money to do that quite quickly, and looked for a different way. And so, I love writing, I love reading as a kid. So, you know, getting into the journalism aspect of things was an obvious choice for me. And yeah, I've been blessed to work for some really amazing brands, and to work with some really amazing people who've really helped me come on and to work on my style and my writing and my ability to, you know, to cover a championship and get those stories that every journalist kind of wants to get. So yeah, that's the whistle stop tour, I guess.
You know, that's an interesting story, because being over here in the United States, when you think of NASCAR, and I don't want to paint the wrong picture here, but you know, people think of rednecks or hillbillies that follow NASCAR, and that's how you got your start. Obviously, as you said, being sounds like growing up a huge Jeff Gordon fan. So you know, when people think of NASCAR, you know, they think of rednecks and people of that nature. But interesting how that influenced you across the pond there.
Yeah, well, you know, I give Jeff a lot of credit along with Dale Earnhardt for opening those doors to a different crowd, a different crop of people. And I think NASCAR was doing all right for itself even at the time, but I think Dale Earnhardt doesn't really get the credit from a lot of people for what he did for the business side of NASCAR from behind the scenes. And I know from speaking to Jeff quite a few times now that Dale was a big influence on him in terms of how to present his brand and how to get his business together and how to manage that side of things. And that obviously ushered in a new era of NASCAR for the kind of commercial side. And Jeff was on your cereal boxes, your Christmas decorations, basically anything you have around your house, Jeff was on it and available. So that was a great time for NASCAR, and to see him on things like Letterman, being really thrown at the people. I guess you couldn't move without seeing Jeff Gordon in that kind of late 90s period. And a lot of that harks back to Dale behind the scenes kind of advising Jeff and teaching him about the aspects of the business and stuff like that. So really interesting transitionary period in that 90s decade for NASCAR, and one that I've really enjoyed going back and reading more about since. And obviously not lucky enough to meet Dale, but I can feel from when you speak to Jeff how much of an impact he had behind the scenes, even though they had the kind of outward rivalry that everybody else saw. There was definitely a huge amount of respect in the background there.
Yeah, you bring up a great point talking about endorsements and things of that nature. I can remember growing up, and I'm probably a little slightly older than you. That when you think about NASCAR merchandise, it was you had a selected set of drivers, and the two you just mentioned there were the top two sales. It seemed like year in and year out with Dale Earnhardt and Jeff Gordon. And I think you're absolutely right that the late Dale Earnhardt doesn't get as much credit as he deserves for what he did for NASCAR, as you mentioned, not only on the track, obviously, but in the background, as you were talking about there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even now, probably Dale and Jeff's merchandise are up there with the best selling. So that's no surprise, and that's just that just reflects on kind of what they've achieved and what they've built. And it's great to see Jeff now. I guess for a few years, maybe being a little bit outside of things or not being in the public eye quite as much, but now coming back into that with his new role. And it's really nice to see him around, speaking again regularly and playing a big part in what Hendrick Motorsports is doing. Looking at the future as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, young NASCAR driver, and then you transitioned. It sounds like to IndyCar, obviously following the Ganassi team there with the old Kmart paint scheme. I think is what you were referring to there.
Target, definitely
Target.
Target.
That's right. Target. See, yeah. So you transitioned to IndyCar, and that's got to be a whole different world for you coming from NASCAR to IndyCar.
Well, yeah, I guess for any person coming from Europe, you'll hear the drivers that have come from Europe and more like international championships talk about this a lot. But the atmosphere is different, and the way things are done in American motorsports paddocks are a lot different to how they are in Europe. And as much as there's a cadence to it for a driver, there's a cadence to it for a journalist as well. And coming to this, this is my I guess my third season now, but still learning, meeting people, figuring out how this paddock works and how to go about doing things. There's always an etiquette to journalism when you're dealing with the PR and different team personnel and stuff like that. So still, I'm still learning every day and absolutely loving that experience. It's really interesting to see how the paddocks work differently. And I guess there's, I don't like when people say that the American paddocks are more laid back, because I think that implies a level of, not unprofessionalism, but just a level of, people maybe not caring as much. And that's definitely not the case. And I really dislike it when people, refer to it in that way. But there's definitely a, different atmosphere, just a different way of doing things. And the schedules are different. And, the way the drivers are treated by the teams and the media is different. So it's really been a big learning experience, and, it's enjoyable. As it was to work in, around Europe and internationally. It's been just as enjoyable here in the States as well. And they're two very different sort of kettles of fish, but two very enjoyable working atmospheres to be in.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean when you talk about learning your way around the paddock and the way things are done. As I mentioned, me being in my second year, so I definitely know exactly the things there that you touched on, talking about covering IndyCar, getting around the paddock, professionalism, and things of that nature. Well, that leads us up to this season, and what a crazy season, Jack, we have had so far. I know you had the opportunity last weekend to cover IndyCar in Iowa. They have been back there for 2 years. Before we talk about and recap both the doubleheader this weekend, I want to know, it seemed like the atmosphere and the excitement that Hy-Vee brought to the Iowa Speedway this weekend was immeasurable. Tell us a little bit about your experience there, what you've seen on the ground there, how the fans reacted to having IndyCar back in Iowa, and things of that nature.
Well, first of all, it's just incredible to cover a short track oval race in IndyCar. The speed of the cars is absolutely spectacular, and such a, you look at the oval and you think, there's no way they can do like such a rapid time over such a short lap. It's just absolutely incredible, and especially Iowa, because it's got these, it's bumpy. There's different lines. It's not like some of the trouble that IndyCar has had at like Texas or Gateway in recent years, where the racing has not been maybe as side by side as they've probably wanted. And you come to Iowa, and Jimmy Johnson's running three different lines, and he's up almost hugging the wall at some times. And yeah, just a really cool experience, just fundamentally to start with, just to see cars go that quickly around such a short oval is absolutely spectacular. And yeah, as you mentioned, I think it was really well covered on the TV broadcast, so I won't recap too many of the obvious, but yeah, Hy-Vee obviously treating this as a branding PR exercise to increase the knowledge of their kind of Midwestern supermarket brand, and did a really great job of just doing. I spoke about this with on my own podcast about how Hy-Vee were coming to this for the first time, and it's very rare to see a company or a group that doesn't necessarily have so much motorsport experience just nail everything so well first time out, and that's definitely what they did. I know they have a lot of help from the likes of Ray Hall and Penske as well, in putting this event together, but it was still spectacular to see what a great job they did first time around. They had all of the kind of volunteers at the event pretty much were Hy-Vee employees, which it's an employee owned company, so they've got an investment, but it was still great to see them taking time out of their busy schedules or their weekend where they're probably off work or doing different things for them to come to the track and help out. They were all really polite and really cool to talk to, and that was great. And obviously they had the Hy-Vee kind of porta cabin stores where you could go and buy just general stuff that you needed if you were camping over the weekend, which I'm sure at somewhere like Road America that would be even more popular than it was at Iowa. But it was great to see all these kind of schemes they were rolling out, all the money that they put into the speedway. Heard some eye-watering numbers as to how much money they've actually pumped into the place. And yeah, it's it's a feeling you get when you walk through the gates there that something cool's happening there, and it feels like there's some momentum building there, and something really cool. So that was great to see.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And like I said, I didn't get the opportunity to go to Iowa, but just listening on the radio broadcast, the TV call, and then on social media, you're absolutely right. Hy-Vee put a lot of time and effort into this, and not only was I glad to see this go off without a hitch. The unfortunate accident that Newgarden had on Sunday, which we'll talk about. But I was glad to see that all of the IndyCar drivers that haven't been on this Iowa course absolutely loved it, and I was glad to see that this is going to be back. It sounds like for the next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think when you go back to Toronto as well, just to bring that into the equation, we saw 13 drivers going there for the first time, having not competed there before, because it was also 2 years since we'd raced there due to the effects of the pandemic. And we had, I think, 5 rookies in the top 12 in qualifying in Toronto, which was absolutely spectacular. And again, in Iowa, so great to see so many of the rookies taken to this track so quickly. And I think that's a sign of how good this rookie crop is. I think we constantly talk year on year about how strong the IndyCar series is, and perhaps the kind of adverse effect that's maybe had on the likes of the rookie battle is that the rookies are generally so far down the championship order, just because the field is so stacked and it's such a high quality field. It's really unusual that a rookie's going to come in and be 10th in the championship halfway through the season. We're just probably not going to see that for a long time, just because of how strong the championship is and how detail oriented these teams are in extracting the maximum from these cars. So maybe Iowa and Toronto are a great chance for fans to look at that and see how well the rookies are doing. Maybe not so much, when you look down the championship and you see people who are 18th, 19th, and 20th. Maybe rather than looking at that, you can look at the impact they've had in places like Iowa and Toronto, where it's been so difficult for them to come for the first time. And I don't think anyone needs to be told how difficult places like Toronto and Iowa are from a challenge point of view for these drivers, and for the rookies to do so well first time out there. I think that's a really good way to look and evaluate them, maybe in a more kind of focused environment, as opposed to just looking at the points for the whole season.
Yeah, you bring up the rookie crop this year, this season, and that's been a huge topic with it seems like every episode how great those rookies get week after week. Especially you have the Callum Ilots, who he's a one car team, and what he has done, the success that he has had with just that one car is immeasurable. David Malukas is another one. I know he has another car with Takuma Sato, but the success Malukas has had this year, and then you can't leave out Christian Lundgaard as well. So you're absolutely right. This rookie class is quite impressive, and the rumblings, and you've heard these, I'm sure there could be some rookies on the move next year to another car in their second year. Definitely going to be something I think to keep worth watching. But to recap Iowa, first we'll start with the race on Saturday, and a lot of teams had challenges at the Iowa Speedway, but there's one team in particular that just can come in here and just absolutely dominate, and that's Team Penske, as we've seen on Saturday with Joseph Newgarden and the dominance that he had. The only thing look like I could have stopped him on Saturday was the heat, but other than that, there wasn't anybody else on that track that I think could touch the number 2 car on Saturday.
No, absolutely not. And I guess the proof of how far he and Pato O'Ward were ahead of the field was the kind of 20 seconds that they pulled in that final stint over the rest of the field, which, I saw some people kind of playing that down, that, that Joseph was lapping up to, say, like the top 10. People, playing that down because the track's so short. But for me, that was still just as impressive. Like, you've still got to lap all those cars. Like, it doesn't really matter to me the length of the track. I think it's still, super impressive what he was able to do. And I think it just shows, we know how much data these teams have these days, and how much they can, look at their teammates and see exactly what they're doing over the course of a weekend, how they're driving the car. And even with that, Will Power's had years of that now. And even Scotty McLaughlin, we've seen how quickly he can adapt, and how quickly he can, nail these tracks when he gets in a good groove. And even then, those guys couldn't match Joseph Newgarden. And to me, that just shows how, what a special talent he is at Iowa. We don't see drivers running away with races, quite as much as well. I don't think we see that anywhere else other than Iowa with Joseph Newgarden, to be quite honest with you. It's year on year, everyone knows he's going to be, right there at the front. And I think the key to that is he's very sensible when he's moving around in traffic. He doesn't commit to corners too early and is able to move around. He's never really, you never see him committed to one line. He's quite often moving around the track and finding the perfect amount of grip for him and his car setup at that time, and where he is in the stint. And also, he's obviously very good on the tires. So, yeah, I just think it's incredible what he's able to do. Even though his teammates know exactly what he's doing, they can see his data, and they could have gone and looked back overnight after the Saturday race, and looked at what he was doing through the race, and then they're still not able to really do that themselves on the Sunday. Which, when you're talking about people like Will Power and Scott McLaughlin, I don't think anyone needs to be told how good those guys are. And if they can't match Joseph at Iowa, I don't know who can. It's an absolutely incredible performance, and props to Penske as well for putting that program together. And I think it was clear from the tests, the 20 car test that they had at Iowa not long before the actual race itself, that Penske were quite a level ahead. And I think the other teams had kind of maybe they wouldn't admit that they'd surrendered at that point, but I think they knew that Penske were going to be very difficult to beat.
Yeah, Penske absolutely was, but not only was Penske hard to beat on Saturday, taking 2 of the top 5 spots, but Chevrolet as a whole. They sat the top 5. I don't know if there was anything going around the paddock there after Saturday. The other Honda teams were looking around at each other, going, "Do we have anything for Chevrolet?" Because they absolutely dominated on Saturday, taking those top 5 positions.
Yeah, that is true. I think the lap itself is kind of like 50% on throttle. So when it's like that, I tend not to read too much into the manufacturer battle. I think it's obvious that Chevrolet have done a good job in Iowa, but I think as much as anything, Penske and Arrow McLaren SP have clearly done a great job with their car setup and how their cars are performing. So I think maybe they kind of slanted how that looked maybe a little bit on the Saturday. I think obviously Ganassi and Andretti, they're obviously the leading Honda teams, and they were both clearly struggling a little bit with car setup and stuff like that. So I think it's it's always interesting to look at the manufacturer engine battle, isn't it? But I'm not convinced that Chevrolet, like in some of the other races we've seen this season, I'm not entirely sure that Chevrolet turned up with, some sort of super package for this weekend. They've obviously done a great job, and props to them. But I think it might have been more the teams on that level.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Jack, especially with teams when it comes to Team Penske, as we mentioned. Now, moving to Sunday, what absolute heartbreak, I think, for Joseph Newgarden going into the race. I think all of us had an idea as to, from that previous race, who was going to be good, who wasn't. We knew what to look for going into Sunday. And Joseph Newgarden, again, had the dominant car. But just something late in the race, it sounds like may have broken in the motor. I don't know if you can elaborate a little bit more on that, but who's there to pick up the pieces? None other than, as you mentioned, Pato O'Ward, who puts himself right back in the championship hunt after picking up this win at Iowa on Sunday.
Yeah, I think I saw Marshall Pruitt had done an interview with Tim Cindric, the president of Penske, and Tim had said that it was a right rear shock potentially that had broken, but they still weren't 100% clear on what had happened. So that was a big part of obviously the crash. And yeah, Pato, I mean, it's so difficult to look at the championship and see how many points Pato's lost through things that are out of his control, and there's a good chance he'd be, right up there with Marcus Ericsson in the championship if he hadn't have had those failures. So yeah, really kind of disappointing to see where the championship's at with Pato kind of, much further behind than he probably should be based on his pace and his own, individual, performance over the first half of the season. So that's a big disappointment, but it does set up the story that he's going to be, coming back over the second half of the season and trying to work his way back into contention properly. And he obviously had an amazing Iowa weekend. And, I think it's really important to point out that he incorrectly has this reputation of being a really aggressive driver who's hard on his equipment and stuff like that. Whereas I think last year a lot of that was just how the car needed to be driven to go fast. The setups that our McLaren SP had there. And if you look at Iowa, the things you need to be, quick at Iowa, you need to be very patient in traffic. You need to be able to move around the racetrack and, be able to, not commit to a corner and kind of hand the corner over to the person that you're passing. You need to have some flexibility there to be able to move around. And also you need to be able to look after the tyres long into a stint. And you only have to look at the results from the weekend. Pato second and first. That tells you exactly what kind of driver he is. He's a driver who gets stuff done, and it doesn't matter whether he needs to be aggressive with the car or whether he needs to, be a bit more gentle with the car and look after it and kind of just stroke it home. He's a driver who can do all of that. So really impressive, and I'm happy for Pato that he gets to have races like that where he can show his real, ability, what he's really about, because I think he gets a bit of a bum rap sometimes from people who maybe don't necessarily understand exactly how he drives or what's going on when he's competing.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I am a huge Pato Award fan, and I think Zach Brown and company have definitely hit a home run, getting him in his stable and then giving him the contract extension that he did this past May. I think somebody else that had a great weekend outside of Pato Award, I think, had to be Jimmy Johnson, especially his finish on Sunday, putting that number 48 car in the top five.
Yeah, I don't want to. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but my favorite Jimmy Johnson quote from the weekend was him saying that he was glad there was no braking zones, which is just fantastic, absolutely brilliant. I love that. Jimmy's not changed a bit since he's left NASCAR and come to IndyCar, and there's not a selfish or egotistical bone in that man's body. Like, he is one of the nicest guys to deal with. He's obviously the most famous and well sought after drivers in the IndyCar paddock, at least, and he still gives you just as much time as he would have done before, and as much as he possibly can. He's just a stand up guy. He's anytime you get to spend with him, no matter how short it is absolutely brilliant, so enjoyable, and it's great to see. A driver who is nice and fast at the same time. It doesn't have to be this stereotype of all fast racing drivers are horrible or have a certain level of ego about them. There's none of that in Jimmy. Obviously, he's very competitive and wants to win, but yeah, can't praise him enough for how he is to work with from the media side and just from a performance point of view. I think everyone's seen. I think the media are quite obsessed with how he's got on since he's been in IndyCar and the results and things like that. But he's there and he's happy and he's enjoying himself. And who are we to put him down for that? he said a few times. He told me just before Toronto that he feels like he's doing his learning in an elite series, and that's how you've got to look at it. Like, he's done no proper single seater stuff before, and it's very, very difficult to come into a championship at the level of IndyCar and excel. And on the ovals, he's used some of his experience that he's had from NASCAR, some of his smarts from oval racing, and it's really served him well. And I think it's taken him a little bit of time still to learn about how the IndyCar handles specifically on an oval. It's not as simple as, oh, Jimmy Johnson's done ovals in NASCAR, that means he's going to be a rapid IndyCar racer straight away. He's still learning about the car and how it performs. But we saw in Iowa, he's not scared to move around. He's still got amazing car control. We saw that in qualifying at the Indy 500 as well. And we saw it a couple of times over the Iowa weekend. And there's people like Scott Dixon saying, maybe I need to move around the track a little bit more to kind of emulate what Jimmy's doing. And when people like Scott Dixon are sitting up and taking notice, then that's always a good sign. So yeah, great to see him just having a little bit of success and a little bit of noise to kind of quieten the doubters over his less than exciting road course and street course form. But I'm very positive about the whole thing. I'm happy to see him in IndyCar. I think he does a great job promoting the championship, and people should give him that leeway of the fact that he was never going to come in and be a champion, and he was top 10s or top 15s were always going to be the goal for him. And I don't think he's out of that conversation for the future in terms of if he keeps learning and keeps adapting to this IndyCar and keeps just getting better every week, then I don't think top 15s are out of the question. But on the ovals, definitely I could see him winning a race.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. He is obviously, learning on the fly, the learning curve. And I asked him that on Sunday, what his maturation has been from NASCAR to IndyCar. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Top 10s, top 15s, that's all you can ask for. And I think you're absolutely right. By the end of this, whenever he wants to call it a career in IndyCar, he's going to get at least one. And I think he's on the doorstep of doing that for sure. After the race on Sunday, there was a little bit of concern in the Team Penske camp, specifically Joseph Newgarden. Sounds like a concussion-like symptoms. Went to the hospital there in Iowa. Anything source-wise you can give us? I know he was released from the hospital, but I don't think it's been officially announced yet if he's going to be driving this Sunday. I know Santino Ferrucci is on standby just in case. Any more you can give update wise with that?
There's not a lot to update, just because Joseph will be reevaluated on Thursday morning. So it'll be Thursday morning by the time any of the IndyCar personnel have got to him and potentially cleared him or not cleared him. So that was always the plan anyway, regardless of after the crash on Sunday. It was always the plan that IndyCar would reevaluate him on Thursday anyway, and then obviously fell in the paddock and had to go back to the infield care centre, and that's when he was taken by helicopter to the nearby hospital. I know there was a lot of people worried about him being taken by a helicopter, but that was purely just because of concert traffic and how far away the hospital was from the track. So just a sensible move there to get into the hospital quickly. And yeah, obviously, as you mentioned, he was released, and very difficult one. I mean, I don't want to speculate about his condition or what happened. I think for context, the only thing I'd say is obviously that Iowa weekend is one of the most demanding on the schedule. There was multiple drivers having IV drips after the Saturday race to get hydrated again, ready for the Sunday race, and it was so hot. It was really, really hot, especially in the cars. Obviously, the drivers in overalls, and with the aero screen, there's not a lot of air circulating inside the car at all. And the other thing I would mention is that Joseph just feels like he's under a lot of pressure right now to deliver results for that team, because they've clearly hit incredible peaks, winning 4 races this season. Pretty much any other year over the past 5, 4 wins would have won in the championship, but because he's been so inconsistent outside of those 4 race wins, he was just about to take the lead of the championship had he stayed ahead and won that Iowa race. And we know how much pressure he puts on himself to carry that team forward, and he's searching for that 3rd championship that he probably should have won before, and as for whatever reason has not. There's been some complicated seasons where arguably he's been the best driver in the series, or at least performing to that level and not won the championship. So yeah, I think there's a level of pressure that he puts on himself, and you saw that, I think, in his post-race press conference when he was released from the infield care centre, talking about how this never happens at Penske, and how they can't afford for it to happen. So definitely a high pressure situation in the heat of Iowa with dehydration and all that sort of stuff going on. So a really complicated weekend for all the drivers, not just Joseph. So we'll keep a close eye on what goes on now. There'll be some tests. The drivers do some tests in the off season that give the IndyCar medical team a baseline, so they'll be able to retest him on Thursday and test his results against what he's given before. And they might I don't know if they're going to get him in the sim, but that's normally a test that they'll do as well. They'll try and get if there's time, they'll try and get the driver and their engineer in a sim and kind of evaluate how they're working together. And the engineer can give feedback as to if the driver's kind of performing normally and giving good feedback and stuff like that. That might be something they look to do on Thursday morning as well. I'm not sure if that's going to be part of the kind of assessment process, but yeah, we'll wait with bated breath and hope that Joseph is first and foremost healthy and fit and willing and able to race at the weekend, because he's part of this really interesting championship battle. And anyone who wins 4 races deserves to be in the chance to win the championship at the end of the season. So we hope that he'll be back racing. But if he isn't, Santino Ferrucci's on standby. Penske have loaned his seat from Dry and Rhine Bowl Racing, and I believe Santino was able to get in the simulator on Monday as well, because he was already heading to North Carolina anyway. So he was able to get in the Chevy sim there, I believe. So he'll be as prepared as possible. But as we know with Santino, he doesn't need much preparation. He's usually pretty good at jumping in these things and just nailing it straight away.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I believe he has done that, I think, twice this year, come in basically off the bench as a pinch hitter, as they say in baseball, and has turned in 2 quality races, if memory serves me correctly. And Joseph, hopefully, we wish you a quick recovery, because obviously you are in a dogfight, as Jack pointed out there, for the points, as we dwindle down to just a handful of races left. Speaking of races left this weekend, you, along with me, and I think a whole bunch of other people, are going to be back at IMS. It's been a few months since we were there to cover the Grand Prix that's taking place on Saturday, IndyCar NASCAR event. I thought it'd be all quiet on the Western Front, Jack, but this morning we get up and see there is a civil court filing here in Marion County in Indianapolis to do with 2 certain individuals, Chip Ganassi Racing and Alex Palou Racing. Anything, first indication when you caught wind of that, and anything that you can add to it?
Not a whole lot of surprise, to be honest. It felt like from the beginning of this whole thing that there was going to be some sort of legal proceeding somewhere along the line. So I guess that bit was kind of expected. I guess because a lot of the court files are protected, we don't know a whole lot about what exactly the court case is, even, which is a really interesting aspect of this. It's a bit annoying from a journalist's point of view, because that's kind of that's the story, right? What is Ganassi suing Alex Palou and his racing entity over? So those court files have been protected, so we don't know about those. We do know about some of the court files that have been released. A couple of Alex Palou's tweets and the McLaren press release announcing that Alex would drive for McLaren next year. So that's part of it. We know Ganassi want this sorted, potentially by the end of August. That's what they've asked for. And we know that Alex gets between 20 and 23 days to reply to this, this whole situation. So we know that's kind of what we know. We don't know a lot. We just know that this is happening. And I think from bringing it back to an IndyCar standpoint, there's not many times in history where an IndyCar driver is driving for a team that is, currently in legal proceedings against them. So not to mention a driver who's trying to win them a championship, a second championship, trying to defend a championship. So absolutely baffling situation to try and get your head around, really, and try to understand. And to be honest, even if we had those court documents, we wouldn't be able to talk about them anyway. And they're kind of behind closed doors at the minute. So we'll watch that one with bated breath. It'll probably be the end of the proceedings where everything comes out, where we'll find out, exactly what's happened. But obviously has massive implications. It's my opinion that, I feel like Ganassi, are looking elsewhere for next season as much as, anything that I've read elsewhere. from sources in the paddock and just my own kind of investigative work in the paddock, it doesn't feel like Ganassi want to move on with Alex Palou next year. But again, that's just from paddock sources, and these things can change so quickly, as we've already seen with this story. 1 minute Alex was signing a contract extension with Ganassi and happy about it, and a couple of hours later he was joining McLaren and rejecting the fact that quote came from him, and that that he hadn't extended his contract. So things are going to move extremely quickly in this one. All we can do is kind of watch it unfold and kind of try and work out what's going to happen with the 10 car and also at McLaren, because this has massive implications for whether Alex will drive for McLaren next year, obviously, as well. So, and in turn, Felix Rosenqvist, who's also kind of sat on the sidelines at the moment, wondering where he's going to drive as well. So that's another reason why, I think both teams need to move quickly when it comes to the silly season and getting those, 2 cars filled. So they're both, motivated to get this sorted quickly. So whether they can do that or not as a process of the court proceedings, we'll wait and see.
I just have this funny feeling, Jack, that this isn't going to turn out well for Alex Palou, and I have no inside information at this time, but I just have this feeling that he's going to end up, unfortunately, on the wrong side of the legal end of this, and he's going to have to sit out 2023. I just have this funny feeling that Chip's going to pay him just to sit in 2023. I think it's a huge loss all around, but that's the way I guess contracts are. And I don't know if this was a fraudulent mistake by the Alex Palou camp, not knowing that Chip had this team option in his contract. If that's the case, man, somebody dropped the ball big time on the Alex Palou side of things.
It's difficult with contracts, obviously. We can speculate and think about some of the, what we know from other drivers' contracts at both teams and try to kind of add 2 and 2 together. But ultimately, none of us have seen the contracts involved. So all you can do is speculate at this point, what you think is happening. I think everyone, the problem with this, maybe getting your head around this, is the fact that everyone involved here seems, like really competent groups. They're all experienced motorsport people or groups of people who you'd like to think have been through a million contract negotiations before and have dealt with this kind of thing a million times over. We especially know that people like Zak Brown and Chip Ganassi have. So that's where this whole thing is so interesting. It's interesting, I guess, is because, I guess people assume that one side has got this really wrong and that one of them, really hasn't understood what the other one's contract is. But this is where it's so totally difficult when it comes to contracts, because you just don't know what's written into each contract. And, either one of the team bosses might have woken up the morning of presenting a contract to Alex Palou and added something in there or changed something compared to what other drivers have had before. You just don't know. And, even looking back at some of the other, Ganassi contracts, I know, Scott Dixon's come out and said that a lot of them are similar and they kind of have the similar mechanisms in and stuff like that. But even then, like I said, the team bosses or the management groups could have negotiated terms that are different or had something inserted into a contract. So, I guess that's the unusual part of this scenario, is that we kind of trust everyone involved to be really competent and great at their job. So, thinking that one of them might have made a mistake here is almost unimaginable. We'll wait and see how this works out. I did ask Alex point blank whether he would be happy to sit on the sidelines next year, and if that was something that he would be happy with in the context of with a longer term deal being in place and sorted. Would he take the year off, kind of lying down to have the longer term contract that he's looking for? And he said no. He said nobody wants that. Nobody involved in his future wants him to be sat on the sideline in 2023, and he point blank said that wouldn't be happening for him. So all we can do is take everyone at face value at this point. And like I said, wait and see to see what comes out of this. I know that's a fairly boring way to look at it in one sense. It's much more exciting to speculate about all the kind of juicy details of this. But when it comes down to the fundamentals, because it's a contract and it's behind closed doors and no one has seen the contract, even McLaren won't have seen Alex Palou's Ganassi contract, because that's not, that's a private contract held between team and driver that isn't, that other teams aren't allowed to see. So even that won't have happened. So you're down a rabbit hole here of things that could be happening.
Yeah, I think that's that's ultimately that's the only approach that we in the the journalistic side of us can take, obviously, and this is definitely going to be worth watching to see how this plays out. But getting back to the race this weekend, the Gallagher Grand Prix, give us a little bit of preview. What for people that are going out to the race or they're going to watch it on TV or listen to it on the radio? What should they be looking for, Jack?
Well, the absolute great thing about the second Indianapolis road course race of the season is you can pretty much throw everything you've learned from the first race of the season out of the window because, amazingly, even though it's the same track, every time we go here for a second time later in the season, things are totally different. So if you're a fan and you're wondering whether to go and you're thinking we've already had a race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway earlier this season on the road course, throw that out the window and go because I guarantee it'll be different. That's one thing that's for sure. Obviously, it's a great weekend in the sense that it's sharing with NASCAR. So if you're a fan of all motorsports and you're a NASCAR fan, you want to see well, I guess see the new NASCAR in action and see some proper NASCAR road course racing action, then the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is the place to be this weekend. I think from an IndyCar point of view, it's really all bets off, to be honest. And obviously the last race we had there as well, not just the fact that the second race of the season is always different. The first race this season was wet, so we basically have nothing to go off in the sense of pace. So it's going to be great to see. We know the people like Will Power, Roman Grosjean, Rinus VeeKay always come to the fore for some outside bets for the second two there. Will's obviously fighting for the championship and extremely motivated at the moment. And Marcus Ericsson had an absolutely fantastic race in the wet here earlier in the season, and obviously he's leading the championship. So yeah, it's going to be a fantastic weekend, and I don't mean to be a cop out about it, but genuinely the kind of the form book kind of goes out the window for the second race, and things are always different year on year, even not to mention kind of the race earlier in the year as well. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to seeing how the teams approach this weekend. I'm really looking forward to seeing the Alex Palou Ganassi situation, because that is going to be, it was already, we thought, kind of turned up to 11 when this all happened to start with, and Alex was put in front of the media in Toronto, but now this has gone up another level because this is, we've got litigation involved now, and he's driving for them. So that's a whole other interesting situation. And then we talked about Pato O'Ward earlier. I think he'll desperately be looking for a strong result to kind of overcome those difficult races he's had in recent weeks and kind of build on that Iowa momentum. So that'll be really interesting to see as well. And of course, Colton Herta, who went through a couple of races, I seem to remember here at the start of his career, where didn't quite have the place figured out or didn't get the results that he really deserved here, and then really started to perform extremely well here, and obviously got the win in the wet back in earlier in the season. So he's another one who's kind of out of championship contention now, I think, but will likely go on a run of races in the second half of the season here, like he did last year. Some really strong tracks for him, so he'll be looking forward to that. And he's also got a gig in Indianapolis on Thursday, playing with his band, the Zibs. So and fantastically, their gig poster features Colton Herta's upside down car from his crash at the Indy 500, which is some great kind of self humor there, and a really cool way of interpreting that. And just Colton's a great guy for that kind of thing. Maybe having some fun with himself, and to see that gig poster, I thought was really fun. And yeah, looking forward to seeing how he gets on this weekend as well.
Yeah, you absolutely hit on all of the storylines that I was looking at. From is Santino Ferrucci going to have to jump in the number 2 car and come off the bench cold again this weekend? And then if everybody's fantasy would play out, what kind of awkward handshake would it be, or celebration, if Alex Palou was to find himself in victory lane? I think a lot of people are asking themselves that as well. And then, not dominance, but Colton Herta winning the race in the spring, in the month of May. And as you said, it was, kind of depending on where you were sitting at on the track, because half the track was dry, half the track was wet. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Throw everything out the window that you learned back in May, because it looks like the weather on Saturday could be picturesque, about the 80 degrees and sunny. So everything you learned in May, like you said, I would definitely throw out the window and it's going to definitely be a interesting race for sure with all of the storylines going into it. And I can't imagine what the media bullpen tomorrow. Alex Pillow, I hope you're prepared tomorrow because you are going to get a bulk, if not all, of the media for sure. Jack, for people that we're going to wrap this up here. I don't want to hold you too long. For people that want to follow you, I know you do an amazing podcast as well with J.R. Hildebrand. For people that don't listen to that, again, shame on them. But where can they find that at, and then where can they follow your work on social media?
Yeah, so I'm on social media at Jack Benyon, Benyon, so you can catch me there. And yeah, our podcast is available on all kind of like major podcasting platforms. And the good news is that sometimes I can just ask a really short question and just let JR Hildebrand off his leash and let him talk, because we all know he loves to talk. And man, has he got some insight when it comes to IndyCar. I mean, he is the absolute perfect person to host a podcast with. And, we have some fun. We take the mick out of each other a little bit. But when it comes to, getting into the storylines of IndyCar, I think JR helps me do a pretty good job of that. And JR himself is just so well connected, not just in IndyCar, but all the way around motorsport. And, for anyone who knows him or follows him, he's got a lot of what I would call fever, which is like a bit of a term. I guess you would describe that as someone who's interested in lots of different types of motorsport, interested in motorsport history, interested in cool cars and just cool things, basically. So JR is definitely one of those guys. And yeah, it's honestly to record a podcast with him every week is awesome, because I still go back to think about watching him in the Panther racing car when I was a bit younger, and remembering just how well he handled everything that happened in 500 there. And I don't think there's another. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's the one. So yeah, I don't think there's another human being on the planet who would have handled that situation as well as JR did. And I'm sure many people agree that his career should have been a lot longer and a lot more fruitful than it actually ended up being. But for my benefit, I get to speak to him every week on our podcast, and I get all of that brilliant insight and stuff like that he should really be like on the TV coverage or something, doing something a lot more massive. But it's great to have him. And yeah, like I said, sometimes I joke with him that I'll just send him a little picture of my face to stick on his microphone, and he can just talk into that, because you don't need to do much. You just kind of tee him up and let him do his thing, and he's awesome. So yeah, if you can't tell, then I get really excited about hosting a podcast with JR. So yeah, definitely go and check that out. It's available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you and him, the podcast that you guys do, that is one of the first listens of the week for me when I need some great insight or to maybe find something to write about. Definitely listen to both of you. Give JR my best. Hopefully we'll be able to maybe see him this weekend. I know we'll probably cross paths once or twice on Saturday. Well, I'll make sure that happens. But Jack, again, huge thank you for carving a little bit of time out of your busy schedule to join us. Enjoy the race this weekend. We'll talk down the road, and especially we'll talk this weekend at the media center for sure.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been great, and yeah, big fan. So thanks so much for having me on, and yeah, great. Hopefully get to meet you over the course of the weekend.
Oh, well, I will definitely will make that happen. But Jack, again, go check him out. Social media, go subscribe, like his podcast he does on a weekly basis. If you're looking for a great insight that you're not going to find anywhere else, definitely go check out the podcast him and J.R. Hildebrand do. We'll be right back here on Push to Pass.